Welcome back to the Bronx Journal. I'm your guest host, Sheila Aquara. In the mid-1980s, the country was hit with the crack cocaine epidemic, a drug that was easier to produce, more profitable for drug dealers, and devastating to New York. It was at that time that the Wild Cowboys gang made a huge impact through their successful drug dealing business. Their rise and fall reveals an interesting era of New York City history, a story now being told by those who have lived it. Here to discuss the history and an upcoming miniseries about the Wild Cowboys gang is writer and producer Lorenzo Collado. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now tell me, how did the Wild Cowboys gang start?
Before I tell you how they started, I want to differentiate between gang and organization. These guys are more of an organization than a gang. If you look at the history of gangs in New York City and America in general, you'll find that it was usually a minority group that was ensconced in a neighborhood where they were either the minority racially or just economically deprived, and they were being picked on and whatnot, and then they banded together, and because of power through numbers, they were able to fight back and protect themselves. And then later on, other legal activities came about because of their power. This group, however, wasn't a gang from the onset. It was an organization put together to make money. And the violence was, most of it, I'd say, was a byproduct of that crack cocaine selling. But to answer your question, the organization started when Nelson Sepulveda, who was selling crack cocaine out of a building, 603 Beach Terrace in the Mott Haven section of the South Bronx, succumbed to an illness because he partook of drugs himself. He asked his brother Lenny to come in and hold the fort down while he got better. What ensued then was a whole rationalization of the business, which at that time was comprised of selling pre-packaged cocaine in vials. What his brother Lenny Sepulveda did was he came in and he brought his own people in, his own managers, figured out a schedule, started cooking up his own crack cocaine, and sold his own brand to the clientele that had already existed because of Nelson's dealings there beforehand.
So how did that affect the community?
Well, that community was already devastated in terms, economic-wise, it was already devastated, and there was a lot of poverty. It was in the Mott Haven section of the Bronx, and the white flight that had occurred in the late 60s and 70s had already taken effect, and the people who were left behind were of desperate economic means. But it devastated them in that it brought more crime to the area, unspeakable crimes. And it ruined lives in that a lot of the clientele were from around that area. I mean, there were people from Westchester coming in, from Connecticut, from Manhattan, because of their special brand of crack cocaine, but it really devastated the area more so. But that building had burnt down to the ground, and they moved across to another building, and they started dealing their wares out of there. And that building was 348 Beekman. And yeah, they made a lot of money.
What made you want to make a documentary about this?
It's funny because I had read the book Freakonomics, and there was an article in there called Why Do Drug Dealers Still Live at Home with Their Parents? It was written by a sociologist, Sudhir Venkatesh, who's a professor at Columbia University now, but who at the time was doing his thesis and had encountered some drug dealers in some of the Chicago Badlands that he was visiting. And he was able to infiltrate the gang and talk to them, and he learned that the people on top, that basically there was a certain structure to the drug business. You had people on top and people at the bottom. You had middle management as well, and not everyone made a lot of money. And it was this discovery that some of the lower level drug dealers, the guys who were pitching, selling the drugs hand to hand, were actually making something close to like a minimum wage at McDonald's. So it fascinated me to think about that. And being Dominican, I thought about the whole crack epidemic in New York City and whatnot. And I thought about doing a documentary on the Dominicans who came during that time and why they would involve themselves in an industry that would lead either to death or jail. So a friend of mine turned me on to a book written by Robert Jackal called Wild Cowboys, and he told me that it would talk about the history and whatnot, and about a certain gang that were notorious during that time. And when I read the book, I thought to myself, okay, this is what I want to do.
And was it hard to get the resources to make the documentary and finding the people?
The book was a great aid in doing that because there are actually two books out there, but Robert Jackal's book is a bit more finicky as far as characters and situations, and they give you names. So what I had done was I went to the jails to actually visit these guys and talk to them.
Okay.
A lot of them were reticent about talking to me, and a lot of them didn't. But I put up a trailer on YouTube about the documentary, and lo and behold, 2 months after that, one of them reached out to me. Who are you? What are you doing? What's this? You know.
Were they like adamant when they saw it? They were like, "What's going on?"
They wanted to know what was up, and they were a bit skeptical about me. They didn't believe I was Dominican, and they wanted to know why I wanted to do that. But after talking to them, I gained their trust. They saw that I was just trying to do a documentary to tell the story from their point of view, and they opened up.
Now, did they make you get in contact with the others?
Well, that's just it. After I interviewed one, another one came out of the woodwork and said, okay, I'll do it. After I interviewed him, someone else came out and said, okay, I'll do it. One of the problems we've had is that we can't stop interviewing. I mean, there's so much that's uncovered that we didn't know about, and people keep coming out of the woodwork to be interviewed. So. Okay.
And I know working on this miniseries is Jesse Terrero.
Yeah, Jesse is a producer on the documentary, but he's also the director and producer of the miniseries. Okay. I'm writing the miniseries for him.
Okay, what about Jelena Stewart?
Jelena Stewart is also a producer on the miniseries.
Now, I know Jesse used to deal with music videos. Now, is it different dealing with music videos and then transitioning to a miniseries documentary?
It's interesting because there's always an argument of how well a director's work is going to translate from music videos to movies, but you know, to really be able to gauge a director's talent, to see how he can visually maneuver himself through a narrative, you have to be on set with him and see the choices he makes in what he decides to direct and the shots that he chooses to express those scenes.
Okay.
The thing with Jesse is that he's an artist. You know, his criteria for the shots he selects isn't well, how can I dazzle the audience? Or how can I make this look really cool? It's more like, what do I need to show now to move the story forward? So that's the mark of a true artist, a person who's able to extricate their ego from the process.
Seems like
and let the story breathe. And he's that kind of a director. So.
Okay. And will the miniseries be part fiction?
The miniseries is based on truth, but I mean, there are some things we had to embellish, some things we had to make up, because we got situations and incidents and circumstances, but we had to lay them out in a logical flow for the screenplay. But there were spaces and gaps that we still don't know about, so we had to actually improvise and make things up. But one of the things we relied on was my experience as a Dominican growing up in that era. So.
And what stage are you in the series?
The miniseries, writing it, I'm at the end already. So by the beginning of next year, it should be finished.
And where would it be if someone wanted to go and view it?
That would be a question for Jesse Terrero or Jelena, who's out there somewhere. But we're trying to get, I guess, distribution with a cable channel.
Okay, that would be wonderful to see that story go down.
Yeah.
And tell us about your current involvement with the production as far as the funds. Have you been able to have any problems in allocating funds for the project?
We've tapped some people that I know on the shoulder and asked them for money to travel to the Dominican Republic to be able to speak to some of the deported gangsters. A lot of the gangsters come in and talk to us in the studio where we interview them, and it's cost us nothing except just lunch.
Okay.
So they're willing to talk.
And what type of response have you gotten about the film from people?
About the documentary, in the beginning, I was getting hate mail from some people from the neighborhood because they had they're still notorious, but they had
that must have been terrifying.
Well, no, it wasn't that bad. They weren't really threatening me with violence, but it was more hate mail in terms of why are you doing a documentary on them, you know, these animals and whatnot. But this is a perfect segue into talking about the documentary, how it shows these guys. I mean, they were drug dealers and some of them were vicious, but a lot of them came from broken homes, and that's not to say that what they did was okay. Yeah. But there's an explanation for why someone chose a certain route in their life.
Of course. Yeah. How many viewers have viewed the documentary so far? Have you had screenings, public
documentary isn't finished yet. We're still shooting.
Before you got to the stage where, because I know some people when they do documentaries, they do private screenings to have you done that?
No, we're still shooting. We haven't put it together yet.
Okay, so no trailers or anything?
Well, I do have a trailer on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
But we have about 70 hours of footage right now, but I'm calculating we need at least about 30 or 40 more from what I see.
And besides Jesse and Jelena, are there other people contributing to the project that you'd like to talk about?
There are the people contributing to the project, but that's a question for Jesse or Jelena.
Okay. Tell us how people can reach you, pretty much.
They can email me at cownabelfilms@gmail.com, or they can, I guess, call me at 646-300-4888.
Well, thank you so much for being here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.